This is Becoming Her, a podcast for survivors of abuse or assault to share their stories. I'm your host, Emily Kemp, and I'll be having a conversation with a different survivor each week. I want to be sure to include a strong trigger warning with this podcast. The content we discuss includes topics related to violence. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the super surprise episode of Becoming Her. This is our Mailbag episode, which is just essentially an episode where we are taking questions and comments from listeners and answering them. And when I say we, I mean me and my guest, KP Glasheen, who was episode 5 of Becoming Her. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, we got some feedback from listeners that KP and I have like an extra special vibe, which I super appreciate. We are good friends, and she is local here in Bozeman, so that helps with recording this episode. But yeah, we're super excited to be here. And is there anything you want to say, KP?
No, we're pumped. Yeah, the chemistry is real. So let's do this.
We are gazing into each other's eyes right now. This is going to be really good. Okay. So basically, we have compiled a list of different questions and comments from listeners, and I think we're just going to take them in order, and I'll read them out loud, and then KP and I will take turns sort of just answering them, and hopefully you find it meaningful and helpful, and yeah, here we go.
Let's do it.
Okay. So our first question came from an Instagram user, and the question is, how do you handle relationships with friends or acquaintances that remain friends with your abuser? Especially in a big, small town like Bozeman where we live, and I'm sure in a lot of towns, I think people run into this, especially because abusers are very manipulative and are great at putting on a facade and getting people to kind of be on their team still, even though they've committed some pretty horrible things against their partner. But it definitely happens.
It does. It really does tie into another question here, not to skip forward or anything, but the idea of like, how do narcissists get so many people to take their side after we leave? And so those are very parallel, we shall say, right? And I think you were kind of headed down the track of saying, you know, they're smooth talkers and people like them, and you liked them at one point, right? For so many reasons. And I've always kind of erred to the side of let them dig their own grave, let them paint their own scene. Like they are going to show their true selves eventually to everybody. They eventually showed it to you.
Right.
There are other people that might understand and appreciate what you've been through and have your side, but they have an alliance or a history and a past with your abuser. And, you know, just like any breakup, it's hard just to walk away. As hard as it was for us to walk away, it's going to be hard for the people that also love that person. Yeah. And it's going to take them time. And I would say my best piece of advice there would to be focus on you and your healing. Yeah. Focus on the time that you have with that person that might still be jointly connected, and do your best to not ask about your abuser, talk about your abuser, put your abuser down, and just focus on the relationship that you want to have with that person that is about you and them, and let your abuser dig their own grave.
Yeah. And if for any reason being in a relationship with that person who's still in communication with your abuser is too much, you have a right to step away and like create space. If you want to continue to be in a relationship with that person, totally okay too. It's super personal, right? And you kind of have to gauge whether or not your abuser is going to use that person to get to you, or whether that person is still safe. But I think it's like a really kind of individual situation and personal choice.
I caught myself realizing that, and I'm not saying this is what the person who's asking this question is anywhere near, but for me, I caught myself wanting to still be friends with and relate to the people that knew my abuser, to still have some information on my abuser, to still like the like what if, you know, because I'm more than happy to say, like, I went back to my abuser multiple times.
Sure.
And I always kept the window of opportunity open, because like, what if he changed? Or, you know, what if we changed? What if whatever it was. And so I would think I would evaluate what your intentions are in keeping those people. And there are some of them that are very good mutual friends, and you need to figure out what's, like you said, what's going to work for you and help you and what's going to hinder you.
Yeah.
And I just think being honest with yourself about what those relationships are bringing you and why you are trying to hang on to them is really important.
Yeah, a question that I think is really helpful sometimes is like, does this serve me?
Yeah.
And like whatever answer comes up for you with that question is like up to the individual, but I do think that like asking that question, does this serve me? You know, is this healthy for me? Is this good for me? Is this what I want? Like there can be a lot there.
A lot.
Yeah.
And I think too, that same thread, I live by the, does this feel good? And if it does, do it. And if it doesn't, don't.
Right.
If the people that are around me don't make me feel good, then what the fuck am I doing here?
Right. Yeah. Trust that instinct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Okay. Moving on to question number 2. So a listener from Pennsylvania submitted this question via Instagram, and they said, how would you suggest a sexual assault survivor to become comfortable with sex? No longer triggered, but still awkward and uncomfortable 11 years with the same partner. Yeah, this is a big question. And actually, KP and I were like preliminarily talking about this because it is such a big question. And, you know, full disclosure, I don't talk a whole lot about myself on the podcast because it's not really about me, and it's more about the guests that I'm interviewing. But I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And so I have some triggers that I have to be really careful about when it comes to like sexual encounters with a partner or otherwise, like a committed partner or just like a casual partner is what I meant by that. And so one of the things that KP and I were talking about before the podcast, a great place to start if you're kind of unsure is to become sexual with yourself again. And if you're like, oh, I have no libido, or I'm not like interested in sex at all, like reconnecting with yourself sexually can be kind of empowering and also safe, right? Because It's just you. There's no other person involved. You don't like, it's just you. You can stop whenever you want to, or like do whatever feels good for you or whatever you're comfortable with. And I think like once you can kind of re-engage with yourself sexually, sometimes that is empowering enough that you can start to think about what it would mean to engage with another person sexually, and then like, you know, all that comes with that.
Yeah, because it does. It flows with the idea that you, even coming back into dating and relationships again after abuse, is finding that love for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's finding the appreciation for who you are and kind of figuring out like how you tick. And so in that, like, figure out what makes you feel good and figure out what doesn't make you feel good with yourself. And then as you move into sexual encounters with an intimate partner or a casual partner, because hey, I use casual partners to get over this myself. And I think when you can get to a spot where you can communicate what's good for you and what's not good for you, even with a casual partner,
right?
You
Including
know?
triggers.
Yes.
Not just like what feels good, but like, I don't like that.
Yeah,
you know, like you have a right to say to your partner, whether it's casual or committed, like, this is, I don't want that, or
like,
I do want that, or don't do that,
yes.
or
like, don't cover my mouth.
Right.
You know, like, don't put your arm, you know, heavily like on my neck. Like, don't even try to choke me.
Don't put your foot anywhere near my vagina.
You know,
I don't like that.
Exactly,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And figuring that out and finding what those triggers are that make you not feel good during sexual encounters is hard. Yeah. But it's key. And I think learning how to love yourself is a hard process.
And I think you're hitting on something really important where it's like, it's not just about sex. Like, it's this bigger idea of like, whether it's sex or intimacy or love, all of that has to be centered within yourself first. So self-intimacy, self-love, self-compassion, you know, like sexual encounters with yourself. And then once you feel comfortable doing that, I feel like that's, you know, it's a healthier place to kind of like move forward with negotiating with a partner.
And if you're there, if you're like, okay, like I'm through that step, I can hang out with myself all day
Yeah.
and, we can have a good time.
Yeah.
I think a big step in an intimate long term, right? Because this woman says she's 11 years with the same partner.
Right.
And honey, girl, oh my gosh, I have been with my partner for 10 years. And there are still times that, and I don't know if trigger is the right word, because I know she's saying, I'm not really triggered, but I maybe get a little bit more comfortable with the word triggered, because if there's still that awkward moment during sex, I think that might be attached to a trigger that maybe you're not quite identifying with. But I don't want to own this woman's, words. And what I'm trying to say is I still have to communicate to my husband when times aren't good for me for whatever reason it may be. My uncle passed away on my birthday, and like Emily, I too was sexually assaulted by a family member, by my uncle. And he passed away on my birthday this year. And I think it was like 3 to 4 weeks before I had any desire to be sexual in any way, shape, or form. And I remember my husband was all like, hey, like, what's happening?
Hey, girl, hey.
And I just had to be like, not right now. And he's like, yeah, like, because we've had the conversation, he was so aware and could easily pick up on my cues and was like, all right, you let me know when. And I think we've gotten to that point in our marriage and in our relationship that he almost knows now, even just by listening to me talk to my girlfriends or things that I'll say to him, like, I'm having a bad day, this triggered me, whatever. Like, the last thing he's going to do is crawl into bed and, like, try to slip his hand under the sheets.
Right, totally.
And
even if, no one, we shouldn't expect people to be a mind reader.
Exactly.
But I do think that regardless of whether they can intuit it or not, if you speak up and say certain things like, I am feeling triggered or I'm not in the mood, that always has to be respected.
Yeah.
And partners who don't respect that, that's a bit of a red flag. Okay, and the next question is, what about us who have been through rough family abuse? It's horrible. Yeah, I think that there's a common misconception that abuse happens only between romantic partners, and I do think we've tried to address that a bit in this podcast, but it definitely does not have to be between, a romantic partnership and, like the male being the perpetrator and the female being the victim. It can happen so many different ways. And we have had guests on the podcast in episode 2, an anonymous guest who talked a lot about her relationship with her abusive parents. Yeah. And it was super powerful. And I think what was interesting is in our preliminary conversations with her about like, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? She was like, I don't know. I don't know if I belong. I don't know if I fit in. I don't know if my story belongs in the podcast. And I was like, oh my God, if you are feeling that way, there are so many other people who have come from similar situations who don't feel like they are a part of this conversation. And even just this question, what about us? What about us who've been through familial abuse? To me, that says, oh my God, I'm worried that we don't belong as a part of this conversation. And you 100% belong here.
100%.
Yeah.
That's where my root started, was family abuse. My mother was abused for the majority of my childhood by her boyfriend, not my father. And I think that creates the most trauma in my life. That's where my PTSD resides. That's where so much of what I've had to work on goes back to still to this day. And you belong here.
Oh,
I mean,
100%. And the ripple effect that abuse from other people in the family, whether that's parents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, whatever, the ripple effect that type of abuse can create is profound.
It is.
And I saw a quote, I think it's on the We Are Her social media page, that's like, kids who are abused by their parents don't stop loving their parents. They stop loving themselves.
Yep.
And once you are in that place, you are open to so much abuse from other people. Once you've stopped loving yourself, you're vulnerable to people who want to take advantage of that self-doubt.
It's the fence that we were talking about. You either become the abuser
Yes.
or the victim.
Yep.
So once you stop loving yourself, like you just grow so much hate for
Either
other
way.
people or yourself. So you either let someone treat you like shit or you treat people like shit.
Right. Yeah. So I would say to that question, you belong in this conversation, and, the abuse that you suffered at the hands of non-romantic familial members of your family is not okay. And we would love to hear more. I think more people need to speak out about the abuse that they've experienced at the hands of their family.
Yeah, I think we would love to hear more, and I think the world
Yes.
wants to hear more, and
Yes.
the world wants to hear your voice because there are so many people that suffer from that type of trauma. I think more than we have any idea. I mean, that's
100%.
it's real.
Yes. All right. We have so many more questions.
I know.
I'm feeling pressured. Okay, here we go. From the Instagram account, how do you handle conversations about parents or family that have had to be cut off due to abusive toxicity?
It doesn't feel good to me. I do what feels good, and I don't do what doesn't feel good. I think just owning your boundaries and being firm and respectful of your choice and not pushing your choice on other people.
Oh, absolutely. And like boundaries, like you have a right to your own boundaries and like what feels good to you. And that includes with family members, which can be so hard and so complicated. But if it's a stranger, if it's a sibling, if it's a parent, if it's a coworker, if it's a romantic partner, it doesn't matter. If someone is taking advantage of you, mistreating you, not giving you the respect you deserve, is a toxic person, you have the right to do what you need to do to take care of yourself, which can feel really, really shitty when it is coming from a family member or a parent. That's heavy. And I recommend counseling to everyone.
Right.
Counseling is great. But you don't have to be in a relationship with someone who is mistreating you.
No. And I think if, where you're going with the question is like, what do I say? Do I tell them? Maybe they don't know. That's all up to you. I think that you can just say, right now, this is what I need to feel safe and comfortable and to continue to work on myself. And I don't want to talk about it, or maybe you do want to talk about it, but where that goes all depends on your comfort level.
And if you don't want to say anything, if you decide like, okay, enough is enough, I am done, like you have a right to not have to explain yourself. It's totally, I totally agree, Kristen. It's like really up to where you are at with like your comfortability explaining yourself to this other person, because you don't owe them an explanation. They have violated, they violated your boundaries. Like, if you need to just like put up a wall and be done, you have the right to do that. Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of people who have this idea like family is everything. And don't get me wrong, family is everything. Yes. My family is everything. But there has been times in my life that I've had to separate myself from certain family members for my own mental health. And, I think it's more common than not that the people that are most toxic in your life can be your family. And I personally give you permission to not have them in your life. And if that's what you needed to hear, then you're okay.
Yeah. Amen. All right. Next question. This is so awkward. I'm like, I don't know. How do we move from such a poignant topic onto another poignant topic? Normally, I'm just like, yeah, go ahead and talk. But now I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm in charge of like making sure this conversation flows. All right, here we go. We have a question from a listener in Canada, and they asked, what are your healing practices these days?
Oh, man. Self-love.
Yeah.
I mean, Lizzo's on it right now. Let's
ahead.
just go listen to that.
You've been singing it. No, go ahead, KP. I know you. I'm going to sing it.
No, I'm shy. I just took a DNA test. Finds out I'm 100% that bitch that does self-care.
Yeah, no.
There you go.
Go listen to Lizzo.
Yeah.
But music is, it can totally be a part of that self-care, like finding musicians or music or a spokesperson who like resonates with you, who so you don't feel so alone, who you can just like blast in the car and like feel all your feelings.
Yes.
Totally.
working on that self-care is huge. And sometimes to me, that's like taking an extra 5 minutes in the shower just to like stand there in the morning and breathe and just like remind myself that I am kicking ass at life, you know, because I feel like it's easy just to get up, go, come home, like life happens quickly. And so like for myself, I just try to slow down a little bit and appreciate the moments around me that are happening that make me feel good.
Yeah.
I meditate.
No, don't laugh. It's so beautiful.
I do yoga when I can.
Yeah.
I work out. I eat well. I try to have healthy relationships and healthy communication and share my feelings a lot more than I ever did, because for myself, my PTSD drove me to drugs and alcohol for so long. And that was just me hiding from the pain and not knowing how to deal with it. And then I started talking about it, and then I became in contact with groups of women, like End the Silence, that just started propelling me forward. And I think once you get forward motion, it's like, it's physics.
Yeah.
It's hard to stop
the
that
snowball
shit.
effect.
It is.
Yes.
Like, you just keep plowing forward, and then like the more energy,
and the sun might come out and you might melt a little bit and slow down. But like, you know, once you're, you know, something in motion wants to stay in motion. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's physics.
And like, no, it is. And once you have that forward motion and you do hit a hill or a bump and you have to like push it forward. Yeah. It gets easier every time.
And I think like when you were talking about like, you know, gravitating towards the things that make you feel good, I call that, this is such a weird word and I use it all the time in therapy, I call it marinating. I don't know if that like resonates with anybody else, but it even does. On like the tiny, if I'm like walking my dog and there's like a beautiful sunset and like there's a breeze tickling my face, I will
What's
just
it tickling?
In my face.
Okay.
There's a breeze tickling my face. And I shut up. Please edit this out. I hate all of you.
No.
Ah! Okay. There's a breeze tickling my face. Fuck you guys. And I just like stop though. And like I like in like the pit of my tummy, I have this like feeling that feels so good. And in my mind I say like marinate in this moment. I'm a chicken.
Are you the breast or the thigh?
I'm a chicken in a bag of delicious sweet and sour sauce. And I am but I like have this like mental image of me just like soaking in the moment. I don't know if that's clearly not helpful for anyone.
It is very, very helpful, and I marinate often myself.
Thank you. Yeah. Marinate like a piece of sesame chicken. And it is wonderful. Dogs are great. My dog is like 4 feet from me, curled up on the floor in the studio right now, being the sweetest, most supportive little human. If I ever hate myself, I look at her and I look at the way she looks at me, and I'm like, oh my God, something loves me no matter what I do. I could literally do anything, and this little being in the world who's so pure and is just like a source of unconditional love, I'm gonna like cry, will just like make me feel better about myself, you know? I'm like, if she can love me, even though I'm like a broken human, then I can love me, you know? And recently I came across a term, I don't know if this is helpful for anybody, but like we talk a lot about self-care, and that's so important. But on the other side of that is this idea of self-compassion, which is essentially like, how would you treat a friend when they were coming to you in a moment of need, and then you need to treat yourself the same way that you would treat that friend. So if your friend came up to you and was like, I am an ugly piece of shit, I hate myself, you would never be like,
yeah, you are.
You suck, right? You'd be like, no, dude, you're amazing, and I love you, and you know, like, and you would build them up. And so in those moments when you're coming to yourself and saying, I'm an ugly piece of shit, I hate myself, treat yourself the same way that you would treat a friend, and tell yourself, no, you're awesome, and you're a human, and you're doing the best you can, and you're trying so hard right now, and you're amazing.
You're 100% that bitch.
And there you go, Lizzo. That's all you need. Beautiful. Okay, we're moving on. Question from a Facebook follower. Ooh. Once I started listening to the podcast, I realized my friend might be in an abusive relationship. How do I bring this up with her? I'm going to kind of spearhead this one because I get this question all the time.
Please do.
Yeah. Based on, like my work at Haven, I'm out in the community all the time talking to people and educating them about domestic violence. And people are like, oh my God, my sister, my mom, my friend, my coworker, what do I do? Right. And that is such a big question. I think the first most important point is that you need to be operating from a place of empowerment, which is different than rescuing someone or trying to save them. Nobody, like you as a human being, cannot save somebody. They have to save themselves. But they don't have to do it alone. So someone who's been in an abusive relationship is not used to making their own choices. They have had their power taken away from them. They don't know how to make decisions for themselves, and it can be really overwhelming for them once they're on the other side. Everyone thinks like, oh, well, now you're out of the abusive relationship, so like you're good to go. And it's like, oh my God, no, they have to relearn healthy communication, healthy boundaries, how to take care of themselves, how to make decisions for themselves, and that can be really overwhelming. And so as a friend, family member, coworker, acquaintance, whomever you are to that survivor, you need to be operating from a place of empowerment, which basically means that you are trying to help that person take their power back because someone has taken it from them and now it's their job to take it back for themselves. You cannot do that for them. You cannot reach out and grab their power and hand it to them. They have to be the one to do that for themselves. And because of that, it can be, a bit of a long road. There are a lot of ups and downs. You never know based on any individual interaction with someone whether or not they're going to, get on the trajectory of healing or not, or leave the relationship or not, or, but that's not up to you. All you can do is be an unconditional supportive source of love and support. And I think there's a big difference between telling somebody what to do and being with them and like brainstorming options with them and saying, well, how about this? How about this? How about this? Do any of those sound good to you? And then it's up to them whether or not to sort of take up any of those options that you've come up with together. But having that other person with them, I think, can really help people not feel so alone and not be so scared.
Yeah, and I think reiterating that you're there for them no matter what, unless you have to create boundaries for yourself, because
which you have a right to do.
You have a right to do.
Yeah.
But I feel like everything Emily said about like forcing and the rescuing, it don't work.
No.
I tried it.
Oh my God. And depending where they're at in the relationship, like if things are good right now and you come in guns a-blazing and you're like, you got to get out of there, they're not going to respond well to that. They're going to be like, shut up, and they're going to close the door. They're going to shut you out. They're going to move away, push away. But I do think that sometimes a really gentle approach can work. And if you're their friend and you're a part of their life, you can just say something like, hey, how are things going with you and so, and just let them say whatever it is that they need to say, and then you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think too, maybe bringing up scenarios or situations quickly after they happen that maybe you witnessed or you were a part of, and saying, hey, last night when Bob did X, Y, and Z, that made me uncomfortable. How did that make you feel?
Right.
And start conversations based on what you're seeing and how it's making you feel, and maybe start planting seeds. Because if she is unaware of what domestic violence and abuse and assault and all of that could look like, she may be clueless. And so if you start kind of planting the seeds or creating a space for her to start thinking about how it's making her feel icky, you can maybe start leaving a breadcrumb trail for her. But I think the coming in guns blazing and, your boyfriend's an asshole and he was a dick last night, like that's not going to work.
Right. Especially if they continue a relationship with them and stay in the relationship, they're going to know that you're not a safe person to talk to anymore because you hate their partner, and they're going to feel embarrassed and ashamed.
Correct. Or the partner's she's going to be like, hey, my friend Kristen last night was saying how you made her feel uncomfortable, and then immediately Bob's going to be like, you can't hang out with Kristen anymore.
Right. Isolate.
And then start to isolate. Correct.
I could literally talk about this for multiple hours.
Yeah.
So I think one of the best pieces of advice I could give anyone is to call your local domestic violence resource. So everyone thinks that the 24-hour hotlines that are out there are only for people who are in emergency situations, and that is not true. You, as a friend or family member who's trying to help someone who could be in an abusive relationship, you can call your local domestic violence resource, and a trained advocate will like talk you through how to help that person and kind of tailor fit an approach based on their specific circumstances.
Yeah.
If you don't have a local DV resource, you can call the national hotline, which is 24/7. I mean, there are so many resources out there. So you're not alone as someone who's trying to help, and go get yourself educated. Go look for support from your local DV resource.
Get it.
Okay. Ooh, this is a question specifically for KP from an Instagram follower in the Netherlands.
Ooh.
Okay. When you said you still held love for your ex, I really resonated with that. There was a lot of love there. Do you think all abusers are bad people, or do you think that some of them just have unresolved trauma of their own?
Wow. I'm just saying wow because it's crazy that someone from the Netherlands heard my episode and that it reaches that far. It's pretty cool. It's why we are here. Well, do I think they are all bad people? No, I don't think that they are all bad people. Some of them are pure evil from some of the things that I've witnessed myself or have heard from other women sharing their stories. But I really do believe that the majority of them are just reeling from their own trauma, and nobody has told them there's another way, or they decided to not seek out another way. And it's really sad because in my situation, my abuser's father was an abuser and abused his mother and abused the boys. It was him and his brother. And now all these years later, I can look back and see how it was all just perpetuating on itself. And I don't think that Eric, my abuser, was 100% bad. But I think, especially at this point, from what I've known and heard from his adult life, too far gone. And so with that being said, although they may be good people inside, you are not their savior. You will not change them. The love you have for them will not make them a better person. It will not make them a better lover. And it will not make them the person that you so wish they could be. And as hard as it is to turn your back on someone you love, boundaries are boundaries. Your sanity and your mental health are way more important than sticking around for love. And honey, you will find someone who loves you the right way.
Yeah. And I get this question pretty frequently from community members when I'm out training people about DV. I generally try to steer the conversation away from abusers, but inevitably someone is always like, hey, can abusers change? And like, wow, that's such a loaded question. I personally, in the experience that I've had working with survivors and their abusers, is that it's more important to focus on prevention, because by the time somebody gets to a certain point in their life where they have to abuse someone, in order to have a sense of control over their own lives, like, they're too far gone. And that doesn't mean that they're incapable of other emotions. Abusers don't abuse every moment of every day. They're often loving, they're often kind, they're often, expressing love to their partner. Regardless, though, like, nobody deserves to be abused, and no one needs to be in a relationship where that person is trying to have power and control over them.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's so hard. Like, almost every survivor I've ever worked with has some level of empathy for their partner and has tried to reconcile and wrap their mind around, like, how did this person become this way? And that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. Regardless, though, you still don't have to be put up being treated that way. And you will find a relationship where you are treated with respect and where that person is not trying to have power and control over you. So it's out there.
It's out there.
From a Facebook follower, the question is, I feel like sharing my story how did you start sharing your story, and what are some of the ways I can share?
How did I start sharing my story? I first found a way for an outlet for my story. My local, it's a what's the chapter at MSU? They do the vagina monologues. Help me out.
Saga or Students Against
No, it
Students
wasn't
Against
Students
Sexual Violence
Maybe it was Students Against Sexual
Violence.
Is it SASA or Saga?
SASA. Students Against Sexual Assault.
Thank
they put
you.
on the vagina monologues. There it is.
They put on the vagina monologues here at MSU, Montana State University. And I think at that time I was volunteering for Haven, and I had not really shared my story a ton. I was like a children's advocate, or I would watch the kids when the moms would go in for their little meeting, and I helped clean a couple times, and I was just kind of doing what I could just to feel involved, because Haven always felt really close to my heart. And my girlfriend EJ at the time, who worked at Haven, was going to a speak out. That was actually the first time, was a speak out, and I told my story publicly for the first time. And even then, it was only like a part of my story. That's something that not many people know, that I was really telling my mom's story and my sister's story for a really long time, and how that affected me, and a little bit about the childhood abuse that I had witnessed. And through that, I then got hooked up with SASA and was in the vagina monologues, and had an opportunity to actually write my own monologue. And that was the first time that I spoke about my sexual assault from my uncle. And then through all of that, fast forward another like 5 or 6 years, I was connected with End the Silence. And it was through the training and End the Silence that I was able to really tell my story of my first abuser and like let that go. And so what I'm trying to say here is, for me, it was like this slow progression, and it all didn't happen at once, but it was just through getting connected with my local shelter, getting connected with local events, marches, and the opportunity just started to rise. I also wrote a lot privately in my journal, and I felt like that was a safe place to tell my story. And if you haven't done that yet, I would strongly suggest that as a beginning spot. I also know that We Are Her has a blog, and I know that Stevie and We Are Her are always looking for people to want to share their stories, and also like finding people in your life that want to like share the story, like want to hear your story, and just seeking that out without, like, you could do that without being aggressive about it. Like, do you want to hear my story? But there's moments, and you'll know, you'll feel that comfort.
We're in the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
Like, it's the number of women who've experienced sexual abuse, and men too. Let's to be clear, the number of humans who have experienced some type of sexual abuse, sexual assault, intimate partner violence, familial violence, like, it is pervasive. And once you start, having a conversation with someone and they open up, like, you can connect with somebody who maybe wants to share their story with you, and you want to share their story with them. Not to look up your, local DV resource drum, but like, go do that. They often have support groups or some sort of program where you're able to like speak about your story, or not, or just listen. I personally am a survivor, and I don't talk about it very often at all, because I've always been in a professional role working with other survivors. And so there's this level of like, oh God, like, what is the professional boundary in terms of self-disclosure? But I've recently left my job. I'm going back to school, and I've just just started to talk about my own story like a little bit. And there are people that I feel really safe and comfortable doing that with. But even in counseling, it's hard for me to like say the words out loud, to say the graphic details out loud of some of the things that have happened. Like, I just can't, I'm not there yet. And so don't feel, even if you like have a desire, because I have a desire to share my story, but I can't say it yet. And that is okay. Whenever you're ready, there are people to receive you, but don't feel like you need to force yourself to say things that you're not ready to say yet, because that's just going to be more re-traumatizing for you.
I was going to say that's going to be more traumatic than anything, but there are opportunities out there. I mean, we are her Facebook page.
Yeah.
I'm always peeking on
Yep.
there, and I love the tidbits and the longer tidbits of people sharing their stories, and we want to hear you.
Some online community if you want to get invited to that. It's a private Facebook group, but if you're a survivor and want to be a part of the We Are Her Survivor Facebook group, it's a great place to just be like, yo, I'm having a really shitty day.
Yeah.
Because of X, Y, and Z, and people will jump in and support you. So whenever you're ready, there are people to receive you, including us.
Yes.
From a listener in South Dakota. Oh, God, this is such a big question. When do things start getting better?
I ask myself the same things today. Today, I had a shit-ass day. And it was just like one thing after another. It started when I stubbed my toe chasing the gals were staying at a house, and I stubbed my toe last night and cracked my toenail off. And so this morning I had to get up and put my sneaker on a busted-ass toe and walk on that sucker all day. And it was like every patient I saw, every moment was just like driven by this like moment, you know? And I was just like, when is it going to start to get better? Like, why? Like, I'm in a funk, you know, I just sold my house. And it's like, I think we can all ask ourselves that question. And I think as survivors, we can sit in that question for a really long time. And my blunt response to you is when you make it better.
Yeah.
When you make it better, when you stand up and do what needs to be done to make it better. And so for me, today was just taking a deep breath. I literally walked outside because I work in a cave and I don't get sunshine. And I took a deep breath and I was like, it's okay. Like, legit, people are dying. People are struggling to take their last breath. I am capable. I am loved. Like, you just mentally go through the things that are going to make you thrive for that day and restart. And sometimes you have to do that every day. Sometimes I have to do that once a month, you know, like, but when it comes up, you are responsible for making it better for yourself. And it starts getting better when you take that responsibility and you stopped expecting a man to do it or anyone else to do it for you.
Which is so empowering. And that's not like a judgment. Like, I hear that and I'm like, get it. You know, like, those are the moments where you are responsible for your own destiny. You're responsible for your own well-being. And that can feel like a lot of pressure and it can be really scary, but it's also super empowering. And I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as survivors to like be healed, you know, like as if it is an end goal. It is a destination, and it's not. You are never fully healed. Even people who haven't experienced abuse have their own shit going on. We're all broken, you know, we all have our own issues. It is not a destination. You just have to like take a deep breath and be like, okay, I'm ready to be better. I'm ready to start healing, and then like ride out that roller coaster. And it's a lot of up and downs. It's not linear. You know, I would look at like the bigger trajectory. If you want to heal, it's like an upward progression, right? But there's a lot of dips.
There are a lot of dips. And I think there's this idea. I know for myself, I suffered from this thought that, well, I went through that. I talked about that in therapy.
Right. It should be done.
You know, it should be done. Like,
I'm over it. Yeah.
I used to like tell my therapist, like, I just want all my boxes of shit up on a wall, all neatly placed, all closed and like tucked away, and I just want it to stay there. Like, I dealt with it, it's sorted, it's organized, and I feel like life comes in and like kicks the shelf, and then shit's like ba 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 ba. It's like the dam breaking loose, and I'm like, fuck, you know. But that is life. And once my therapist, she's so straightforward. She's like, honey, I'm so sorry, but that is like trying to herd feral cats, and once you get one in the box, two are gonna leave. Like, that is just how it works. And like, we need to work on not letting your dam break when one thing goes wrong. It's like, I would stub my toe and then I'm like, fuck, I was sexually molested as a child. Fuck, I let my high school sweetheart fuck me up, you know. Fuck, you know, all the shit, you know. And I'd be like, this happened. And I would sabotage myself. And then I would be like, when do things start getting better like they were? And I would be upset that I had gotten back to that place.
Right.
And I think it's important to say they will be good, and then they will not be good, and then they will be good, and then they will not be good.
Totally. But you can build resiliency.
Absolutely.
And there's so many good resources out there. Like, get online and Google how to build resiliency, read some articles. There's amazing books. Like, you know, it's, and I think what I'm hearing when you're like, I stubbed my toe and then I was like, fuck, I was molested as a kid. Like, no, I mean, like, and I hate to laugh. It's so messed. You know, some of us have dark senses of humor. Like, that's how we get through this. But like, no, but really, like, what I'm hearing is like, you can stub your toe and be like, I'm okay.
I'm okay.
I'm okay. You know,
I lost a toenail, but I'll be all right.
I'm okay. And then, like, it's resiliency. Yeah. You know, so go do what you need to do. Take care of yourself in order to build that resiliency, so that like not like one small thing doesn't sort of send the whole, you know, castle of cards crumbling down.
Yeah, and I definitely I feel like I don't want to end there because I don't want to be like the messenger of doom. Like, it never gets better. Because I feel like I just did that. But it does. My good days outweigh my bad days by a million. And it does get better. And it takes time. And it takes space. And it takes healing. You will get there.
You'll get there.
And then you will stub your toe too.
And you're going to be like, I'm okay.
I'm okay.
All right. We have a few comments, so I think we'll kind of get through these pretty quickly. But these are some really amazing comments that some listeners have sent us about the podcast. We can make a couple comments on the comments. But this comment says, I am a survivor of an abusive relationship that took a magnificent toll on my health. Listening to this podcast has been really influential and helped me in my recovery process. Thank you for all you do.
That's why we're here.
I know.
Thank you so much for that comment.
Makes me really happy to hear that there are survivors out there that are listening to this that are finding some comfort or like level of healing from listening to the podcast. It's really, that's like why we're doing it.
It is. It absolutely is. Thank you, Stevie, for that.
Whoop, whoop. Okay, another comment. I found Becoming Her this summer, and it was a catalyst for me to stop pretending my trauma never happened and finally get myself into therapy. I have a long way to go, but this is saving my life. So I am in that same boat where, like, because of my professional role in this world of trauma and abuse and assault, I've always been like, oh, my trauma comes second. You know, like, my job is to help other survivors. Like, you know, and I've tried to address my trauma on and off, like, over the years, but that resonates a lot with me. And even just being a part of this project and listening to other people has, like, really not only helped my healing, but, like, I mean, empowered me to, like, address my own shit. Because for a lot of years, I've been like, no, it's not me. No, it's other people. No, my job is to help other survivors. And it's like, Emily, you're a survivor too, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. And I am strong, and I am empowered, and I'm educated, and I'm a great partner, and I work in, you know, I'm a professional, and I'm a survivor. But that can be really hard to say out loud, and it can be such an intense label to put on yourself. But no, I just really appreciate that comment. So
I do too.
Yeah, girl. Well, and I mean, like, not to like say things about your own story, but
blow it up.
Okay. When I started working with KP at Haven through End the Silence, you were like, oh, my mom's story and my sister's story. And then at one point you're like, you know, I had this relationship in high school, and you started talking about it, and everyone in the room was like, oh, what the fuck did you just say? KP, that was, you know, maybe an abusive relationship. And you're like, holy shit, I didn't even realize, like, I am a primary survivor. It wasn't just your mom. It wasn't just your sister. Like, you were in an abusive relationship, you know? But that can be so hard to see.
It is so hard to see. I identified as a secondary survivor for so long. So long. Which ties back to the family abuse, you know, and like, do we have a seat at the table? Yes, there's actually a table for you in the room, you know. Yeah.
Your own table.
Yeah, your own.
Come on in.
You got your own table.
We give a bottle of water. We have some appetizers.
But yeah, this shit saved my life. It saved my marriage. It saved a really big part of my soul. So, amen to saving lives.
Find your people, man. Find your people. Get out there. Find the people that you can connect with. Find those groups where you feel safe sharing your story, because it can be life-changing. Okay, now last comment here. Thank you, Kendall, and that was episode 3, for being real about PTSD. I've been educating myself on abuse, and I didn't know I could potentially be suffering from something as serious as PTSD. Last week, I was diagnosed with PTSD. I wasn't looking for a diagnosis, just confirmation that something more was going on. Thank you for helping me get the help that I needed. And Kendall's episode is... I was texting KP,
Powerful.
like I was, you know, like I interviewed Kendall, right? And I was re-listening to it and I was like, KP, you need to listen to this episode right now. It's so freaking good. Like, and there's so much. I mean, she talks a bit about her experience with, you know, being a childhood sexual abuse survivor, but like everything that she said, I was like, oh, yes, oh my God. Like it's
amazing.
Just jam-packed full of really helpful information.
Because we are pretty knowledgeable, all of us in this room, about this topic. And when I listened to Kendall's episode, I just had so many aha moments. And I was like, no shit, I did not know that. Like the whole thing about the eating disorders. I was like, I had an eating disorder.
Right.
Like,
Thank you, Kendall.
No way. And I had the information about the PTSD because I, too, have been diagnosed with PTSD. And I remember the first time that those words came out of my therapist's mouth, and I feel so ashamed to say this, but I mean, safe place. All I could think of was, but I'm not in the military. Because
so
PTSD at that time was something that had become a buzzword for me that was attached to all of these soldiers that had gone overseas. And my brother suffered from PTSD and committed suicide, and my sister was and is still suffering from PTSD, not
from being
only
in the military,
but from being in a shitty, abusive household. And when those words like PTSD were like directed at me, like it like totally took me off guard, and then I became educated about it, and it like made me really sad. It made me sad that what I came from created all this fucked up shit in my head, and you know, makes my brain tick differently, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I am with you, girl, because I never was looking for a diagnosis and just confirmation that something was wrong or that I had things that I needed to deal with. But once you know about PTSD and you know how you can work on healing yourself from PTSD, there is a brighter side to life, and I wish you well on that journey.
And one thing that Kendall says in her episode was, I have PTSD. I am not PTSD.
Yes.
And I remember being like, oh my God, that is amazing, because I also have PTSD. I have an anxiety disorder that's associated with the abuse that I've experienced. And but that's not who I am. You know, that's not my identity. I am so much more. I live with that. And there are parts of my PTSD that like make me uniquely me in a way that I like actually like.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't want to, that's hard. I don't think I would want to like not have my mental health issues, because then I wouldn't be me, you know, in like a weird way. But you can learn how to manage it. There's so much help out there. There's so many resources. God, yeah. I mean, counseling, again, is amazing. But, like, there's so many mental health professionals who are so much better equipped to support you in that journey of healing than, like, I am. But, yeah, it's out there. Okay, very last question here. We've been getting this question a lot because this first season of the podcast has been very successful, very popular. We've gotten a lot of support, great feedback, and a lot of survivors have been asking, like, how do I get on season 2? Which makes us very excited. And so to answer that question, we are in, you know, kind of the preliminary discussions around creating an application for anyone who's interested in being on the podcast to fill out. That application is probably going to go live in September. So if you are interested in being in the podcast, go follow us on social media. I think we're just going to put it there. You know, first and foremost, that's going to be the predominant place that you can find it. And just go on, fill it out. It'll be open for 2 months. And then we're going to look at everyone who applied and pick 12 people again, because we'd really like to have the second season be 12 episodes, just like the first season. And then we'll probably be, recording sometime in the winter or spring. So if you're interested, follow us on social media. That application will be out there in September.
And I cannot wait to hear everyone else's stories.
Either. I know, this first season was so good that I'm like, I'm scared. What if I don't do as good a job? But it's not about me. It's about helping survivors share their stories. And every story that I've heard so far is just like so poignant and powerful. And if you have that itch to share your story, then we'd love to have you fill out an application.
Yeah, and if you don't get chosen to share your story here, please seek out alternative venues. Just go find yourself a venue and tell it, girl.
Like, I am renting this wedding venue.
Avenues. Seek out other avenues to do so. And if you need help with that, you can find us at weareher.com and net.
Weareher.net.
Weareher.net.
And come be a part of the community. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Be sure to subscribe and don't forget to check out our online community at weareher.net. If you or someone you know has experienced abuse or assault, you can always call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800